Recently, there was a vote on a piece of legislation that was regarding the BDS movement, and which is the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, which is basically a pro-Palestinian. It's a pro-Palestinian movement, and it's a pro-Palestinian kind of, agenda, essentially, to boycott Israel as much as possible. And obviously, this is something that is being resisted against as much as possible by AIPAC and various lobbying groups out there who can't stand the idea of Israel not having complete and total power over America and telling them what to do, and kind of molding their agenda, essentially molding the agenda of the United States. And this BDS vote was voted for by a lot of surprising people in Congress, and it was very disappointing to see who supported it. So let me get into the article here. This is an article from telesurenglish.net. Very, very good publication. It's actually one of these publications they've been the victim of censorship and among social media, especially Facebook and stuff. I think maybe Twitter, but mainly Facebook, which has gotten rid of their page. They're a very good publication. They cover a lot of stories that the mainstream media, in their ultimate shittiness does not cover and does not care about. And they wrote a great article here titled "Tulsi Gabbard Squads Ayanna Pressley Vote in Favor of AIPAC Bill Condemning Pro-Palestine BDS." So let's get into the body of this piece, and we will discuss it as we go through it. It says the 2020 U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard came under fire for voting in favor of condemning the pro-Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement. The U.S. House of Representatives Tuesday passed 398-17 a non-binding resolution condemning the BDS movement. Gabbard is the only presidential candidate to vote for the bill. Two of the three Democratic members of Congress still running for president, Seth Moulton of Massachusetts and Tim Ryan of Ohio, were absent during the vote. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, known for her pro-Israel views, was absent during the vote as well. That's very surprising, actually. The nonviolent BDS movement, founded in 2005 by 170 Palestinian unions, political parties, refugee networks, and women organizations, among others, has gained such renown that it was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Inspired by South Africa's anti-apartheid movement, BDS calls for nonviolent pressure on Israel through boycotting any organization linked to Israel, withdrawing investment from Israeli companies, and sanctioning the country for its human rights abuse of Palestinians. Along with Gabbard, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley voted in favor of the bill, while the rest of her squad, quote-unquote, namely Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, voted against the bill. The House Resolution 246 says the, quote, Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement targeting Israel is a campaign that does not favor a two-state solution and that seeks to exclude the state of Israel and the Israeli people from the economic, cultural, and academic life of the rest of the world. The bill was introduced by the largest pro-Israel lobby in the United States, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, known as AIPAC, in March. AIPAC has considered HRES 246 a top priority. Apparently, this is a statement from AIPAC's website. It says, Israel has long been targeted with economic warfare, as have American companies doing business with the Jewish state. Most recently, these attacks have taken the form of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Congress has a proud history of defending Israel and American companies from such attacks. Please urge your representative to co-sponsor HRES 246, a bipartisan anti-BDS resolution, AIPAC's website said. Tulsi Gabbard, a self-professed progressive who opposes U.S. interventionist policies, received flack for supporting the bill, and so did Ayanna Pressley. People are legitimately surprised that a politician associated with the RSS movement, RSS voted to condemn BDS. Idiots, wrote journalist Samira Khan. I've heard of her, yeah. She said that on Twitter, apparently. RSS is the far-right parent organization of India's ruling party, BJP. Their ideology is to establish a Hindu nation in India, and BJP supporters are involved in lynching of Muslim minorities in India. Gabbard has always spoken in favor of the Hindu majority in India and how India is a nation of Hindus. Ayanna Pressley was equally condemned, along with Congressman Ro Khanna. Many progressive groups came out opposing the bill. Jewish Voice for Peace, a pro-Palestinian Jewish American advocacy group, said the resolution, quote, continues a dangerous trend of censoring criticism of the actions of the Israeli government. The Israel government has shown over and over that it will continue to violate Palestinian human rights with impunity. Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Pramila Jayapal all voted against the bill. I don't think, Jayapal is not part of Justice Democrats, but she is part of the, I believe she's part of the Progressive Caucus. And might be one of the leaders, I think, of the Progressive Caucus. I know Mark Pocan, who we spoke about in a prior podcast, is the leader of the Progressive Caucus. But Jayapal is a part of it too. It says here, I stand before you as the daughter of Palestinian immigrants, parents who experience being stripped of their human rights, the right to freedom of travel, equal treatment, Tlaib said. So I can't stand by and watch this attack on our freedom of speech and the right to boycott the racist policies of the government and the state of Israel. So yeah, that is a really disappointing thing that happened regarding the vote, that especially coming from Tulsi Gabbard. Now I'm gonna play you guys a statement from Tulsi Gabbard where she kind of gives her take and says, this is why I voted why I voted the way I did. But the thing that stands out to me the most is the fact that AIPAC was so behind this legislation. I mean, that should be a red flag for anybody. Anybody that that knows what AIPAC does. They are extremely anti-Palestinian. They are extremely in the pocket of, I would say, probably majority of members of Congress for sure. I mean, there's so many of them. You would think how many of them truly admire AIPAC. It's quite a bit for sure. And, it's something that it just doesn't seem like they can get past it. The power of AIPAC is so fucking strong. And they have this stranglehold. They have this chokehold on Congress and on the Congress and the Senate, and they're able to manipulate whatever. They're able to manipulate all these politicians and make them vote the way they want to vote. And anybody that speaks out against AIPAC and says what they're doing is not right, which, by the way, Ilhan Omar is one of the people to have done this, and she's gotten a lot of, unsurprisingly, a lot of flack for it, but she has spoken out against AIPAC and the power that they have over the Congress, and she's been called anti-Semitic for it. And anytime you criticize anything that AIPAC does or Israel does or Netanyahu does, you're called anti-Semitic. So you can't say anything against these people unless they're going to have some sort of stupid response where they're going to pretend like you're doing something that's, you're anti-Jewish because you don't agree with everything that Israel and AIPAC wants. And, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's a fucking right-winger, by the way, you don't do something that he wants or, AIPAC or Israel wants, then you must be anti-Semitic and you must hate all Jews and you must hate all the things that they do. By the way, it's kind of ironic claiming that Ilhan Omar, I don't know about anybody else that, that's been accused of this, but claiming that Ilhan Omar is anti-Semitic and anti-Jew, she's first of all, she ran under the Justice Democrats and the Our Revolution banner, which is run by Bernie Sanders, a Jew. He's a Jewish man. So how is she anti-Jew and anti-Semitic when she has the support? Bernie supports her and has worked on him with legislation. She was standing behind him when he was pushing for, when he was, he was announcing his debt, his student loan debt legislation, the one that wipes out $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think Pramila Jayapal that was there, Tlaib might have been there too, Presley too. They were all there, but Ilhan Omar was there. So how is, she's been there with Bernie Sanders, working with him on legislation. So the whole anti-Jew, anti-Semitic shit is complete bullshit, and they just use that as like as their own identity politics, their own identity politics kind of, move to try and like silence any dissent against the Israel lobby or Israel or, AIPAC or anything like that, or Netanyahu or whatever. So first I wanted to read a statement from Ayanna Pressley's, and this is from an article from Mandaweiss, which is another great publication that they report on like news that's going on between news regarding Palestine and Israel, and I would say they're very pro-Palestine, which is good. I think it might be run by a Jewish individual. I'm not sure, but either way, it's a very good publication. They do good reporting. So I wanted to read this statement from it's Ayanna Pressley, and it's a little long, but check it out here. And then this kind of just it's like her explanation for why she voted the way she did. It says, "As I have noted many times before, I arrive at my decisions in close partnership with community. Today I cast a yes vote on H-Res 246 as an expression of solidarity with Jewish families and with marginalized communities that continue to face heightened threats to their safety in this volatile moment driven by hateful rhetoric from the Trump administration. Today's vote gave us a very narrow and rushed opportunity to engage on an issue that warrants much further meaningful dialogue with the voices of all impacted at the table, to say the very least. As a dedicated advocate for survivors of violence and trauma, I will continue to support a two-state solution. I am also proud to be a co-sponsor of H.R. Res. 496, Representative Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Representative John Lewis's resolution that opposes any and all unconstitutional efforts to undermine and limit the rights of individuals to peacefully protest and engage in boycotts. I was raised in the tradition of protest and organizing, and I support our ability to raise our voices through peaceful protest and action is a sacred right that has played a pivotal role in this nation's history. We can call out and question the tactics of a movement, but we should never question or marginalize the lived experiences and voices of those who call out for civil rights and liberties, including the Palestinian people." So apparently this wasn't enough for the critics on Twitter. I think I was one of them that also commented on this. I might have left a tweet or two in response to what Presley said, or just her vote in general. I definitely said that I was disappointed that Presley and Gabbard voted for it. But apparently, yeah, people were asking for more explanation here, and then she gave even more of an explanation. And this is actually longer than the part I just read. So this is on Twitter. Apparently, like it's like a thread. It's a whole thread of like tweets, and whoever wrote this article, they kind of pieced it together and just put it together, and it's all those threads put together. So let me read this, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. It says, I grew up on my mother's hip at organizing meetings. I would not be here today without the concerted protests and sacrifice of generations who fought for civil rights and liberation. I'm a proud co-sponsor of Rashida Tlaib and John Lewis's H.R. Res. 496. Because of that fundamental belief, there are a lot of anti-BDS bills out there that infringe on First Amendment rights at the state and federal level. In my view, H.R. Res. 246 wasn't one of them. What I heard resounding in my community was that voting yes on this resolution affirms to my constituents raised in the Jewish faith Israel's right to exist, a view I share as a supporter of a two-state solution. Like Congressman John Lewis, I believe that I can hold these strong views about opposition. Protest is sacred and activism is critical. If S1 were to come to the House floor, I would vote no. We can call out and question the tactics of a movement, but we should never question or marginalize the lived experiences and voices of those who call out for civil rights and liberties, including the Palestinian people. This resolution does not mitigate the pain and trauma of the Palestinian people, and as with my co-sponsorship of the McCollum bill, I will continue to be a strident voice critiquing conservative Israeli policies. Dissent is patriotic here, and with our allies, we each take these votes alone, but aim to represent the districts we serve. My position is similar to that of Representative Ro Khanna, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Senator Sanders. But I speak only for myself when I share my deliberative process here. This was not an easy vote. In my early months in Congress, it has been clear rushing votes to the floor entrenches the status quo and hamstrings our ability to talk about nuanced issues. I made clear that with leadership, this bill never should have been fast-tracked. It was, in my view, reckless for many reasons. I remain your steadfast partner in the Massachusetts 7th District, even when we may share different views on a vote or an issue. Let this moment be a catalyst for continued honest dialogue on issues of consequence for all of us. So all I can really say to that statement, which the longer one was very similar to the first one, is that if you were, again, you don't like the idea of a bill being rushed to Congress, then you shouldn't have voted for it. Because as we read earlier from the other article from Telesur, apparently a lot of these so some of these politicians, even the two other ones, Seth Moulton and Tim Ryan, who are running also for president, they actually were absent. So was Nancy Pelosi, which is very surprising, seeing as how she's so pro-Israel. And the fact that they can vote absent, but then Ayanna Pressley votes for it, Representative Ro Khanna voted for it as well. It's very surprising to see that they would vote in favor of this legislation. But specifically to Ayanna Pressley, why would you vote for something when you say yourself that the bill was rushed and it was fast-tracked? So just don't vote for it. Just be absent. What benefit do you get out of voting for it? I don't really but she says because this is a path to a two-state solution, and that if we don't do it, it's going to lead to further problems. I mean, I don't really know if that's true. Based on what I see and based on the research that I did, that's not the case. I think that's just I don't want to say that she's taking I don't want to say she's taking talking points from AIPAC, but that seems like something that AIPAC would say to someone to some extent or another. Well, no, not really, because what AIPAC would say would just be wanting to have a one-state solution essentially, and that would just be Israel. But I mean, honestly, it seems like she probably might have listened to a little bit of what the Jewish lobby said, and a lot of that is what they refer to as the Jewish lobby is J Street, kind of similar to K Street, which is just the regular kind of lobbying part of Washington, D.C. But J Street is the Jewish lobby. And, there's many other groups that are much, that are pro-Israel, just like AIPAC. But that's really the only conclusion that I can reach is that Ayanna Pressley is taking a lot of her talking points, at least what she said here, taking it from Israel lobbying groups and AIPAC type groups. And it's unfortunate because she's better than that. And the fact that, she's using this catalyst of civil rights and fighting for the people and doing what they ask of us and all this. Yeah, that's sorry. I don't really believe that. That's bullshit to me. I think that's a cop out to me. But whatever. I mean, at least she gave a statement. Honestly, a lot of these politicians don't really tend to give a lot of statements when they make these kind of votes. Another person, as I'm going to detail in a second here, let's just do it right now. I'm going to play this clip for you guys of Tulsi Gabbard giving a statement on what happened. It's about a 2.5 or 2-minute 20 long clip here. So why don't you check out what Tulsi says here, and then we're going to talk about it on the other side. Check it out.
Now, I've fought. Some of you have sent me messages and posted on social. Some of you have sent me messages and posted on social media asking for more information about why I voted the way I did on a recent resolution talking about BDS. So I wanted to give you some background and talk to you about my commitment to defending our First Amendment rights. Nothing is more fundamental to the identity of our country than the rights and freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution. Now, I've fought to defend these freedoms both as a soldier and a congresswoman, and it's why I will continue to oppose unconstitutional legislation like S1, a bill that does seek to restrict freedom of speech by imposing legal penalties against those who participate in the BDS movement. That's why I co-sponsored HRES 496, to affirm our freedom of speech and right to protest or boycott for any cause, as well as stating opposition to any legislative efforts that seek to restrict these fundamental First Amendment rights. Now, I voted for HRES 246 because I support a two-state solution that provides for the rights of both Israel and Palestine to exist and for their people to live in peace with security in their homes. I don't believe BDS is the way to accomplish that. However, I will continue to defend those who choose to exercise their right to free speech without any threat of legal action. Now, HRES 246 does not in any way limit or hinder our First Amendment rights. In fact, it affirms every American's right to exercise free speech for or against U.S. foreign policy, as well as the right of Israeli and Palestinian people to live in safe and sovereign states, free from fear and violence, and with mutual recognition. Now, the right to protest the actions of our government is essential if America is to truly be a free society. So no matter what our disagreements are about various political positions or choices that our government makes, we can all agree that every American should have the freedom to make those disagreements known and to protest peacefully in support of their views.
I mean, that's a decent statement, I think. I'm not as hard as other people are currently being against Tulsi and saying that she, she's kind of like, buckled to the kind of the demands of AIPAC and whatnot. But it's a little bit better of a statement than Presley because I feel like Presley is using too many excuses, talking about how, this legislation was rushed and this is not the way we should be doing things, but let me vote for it anyway. Whereas, and to be fair, Presley also mentioned free speech and right to protest and stuff like that, but that's really that's a low standard. Like, oh yeah, you're right to protest, but then like, what if you? But then how about like actually listening to what the BDS movement says? Because if you really think about it historically, what the BDS movement has tried to do whatever they have done, it's been a hell of a lot better than any kind of negotiations that have gone on where they've talked about. So like when they've done the whole BDS move, the whole two-state solution conversation, that whole conversation honestly has gone nowhere ever. It has never gone anywhere when Israel and Palestine have discussed that specific kind of, done that kind of negotiation. I mean, if multiple times when, especially under Barack Obama, a lot of times under President Bush too, of course, but many times, the times under President Obama stood out to me the most because I assumed that Obama would be much more diplomatic in standing up for, standing up for, the rights of Palestinians. The last president to do that was, I believe it was Jimmy Carter, or was it Clinton? Yeah, I don't know. I was so young back then, I don't remember. But those two guys were much more better with it than Obama was. And Obama was much better than Democrats are right now. And when Obama wasn't that good. But, it seemed to some extent that Obama, he didn't have as much of the blessing of the Israel lobby. If anything, they really kind of hated him, but he didn't have their support as much as a lot of Democrats do these days, especially the likes of Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, who's Jewish. The only Jewish member of Congress that I can think of that does not, give into anything that AIPAC does is Bernie Sanders. But Bernie Sanders also doesn't support BDS. And when he's been questioned on it, he's reacted very defiantly in a conversation that he was having with AJ Plus journalist Dina Tekouri, I believe her name is. He was just kind of pushing off and kind of pushing away and kind of refusing to answer the questions that she was giving to him, that she was asking him, and he just didn't really seem very patient in wanting to respond to these questions that were honestly really legitimate. And it involved a lot of just putting pressure on him to answer things that a lot of people are demanding out of their politicians. And while he's obviously, again, he's not a shill to the Israeli lobby, he just can't stand answering those questions. And I almost feel like he wants to keep a certain kind of constituency happy by doing that. And I don't know if he ever mentioned the fact that BDS is a detriment to the two-state solution and stuff. But like I said before, the whole idea of the two-state solution, anytime the Palestinian government has tried to offer any kind of ideas for an agreement for a two-state solution, Israel has slapped it down every single time. They've never agreed to it. So to claim that the BDS movement is somehow, infringing on the possibility of having a two-state solution, but we've never had any success with any kind of two-state solution. So how is it gonna be any better without BDS than it is with BDS? At least with BDS, you put pressure on the Israeli government, which pretty much gets whatever it wants from America. We give them all the weapons deals and all the protections. We give them Iron Dome. That's what Obama did. Obama was the person that gave Israel Iron Dome. Even Bush couldn't do that. So, yeah, I mean, anything Democrats do, obviously Republicans do everything for Israel, so that's out of the question. But anything Democrats do, no matter what, the Israeli government is going to demand that they do more. So you give them an inch, they're going to take a fucking mile, and nothing can work. It just doesn't seem like anything works except BDS. So when you talk about how this is a detriment to the two-state solution, I think that's a cop-out. I think that's a bullshit tactic that gets them out of supporting BDS, which ultimately is the only real solution right now. Whereas any other solution, there is no other solution. So what is the solution? BDS. So if you don't support BDS, at least offer up something decent. And all these politicians that are saying that they're fighting for the idea of a two-state solution and you support the idea of that, I want to see a policy. Or you even go to Israel, go to Palestine, go meet with the leaders there, and tell them this is what I support. Come out in support of it instead of just saying, "Oh, I support free speech and protesting." That doesn't mean shit, because ultimately, that's what BDS is doing. They're protesting and pushing for more rights for the Palestinian people. You claim to be in support of that, but then you don't push for any kind of ideas or solutions to make that possible for Palestinian people. And I just think it's a cop-out, and I can't, I'm really disappointed in Tulsi Gabbard and Ayanna Pressley for advocating for these, voting in favor of this legislation, and then whether it's binding, non-binding, whatever, it doesn't matter. We have to have higher standards than this. We can't accept this kind of stuff, especially from progressives, so-called progressives like Presley and Tulsi Gabbard, who's running for president, who many people, other people are also very, they're very concerned about this vote by her, and so am I. I'm not saying that she's betrayed us or betrayed the progressive movement or anything, but it's very, very disappointing, and I would expect much better from her, regardless of her statement here.